comes down. First of all, I hope you don't mind answering a few personal details.
Like, how old are you?
No, I wasn't going to ask that, but you have already told us 1920.
Yes, 1920.
So I can work that one out. And what was your maiden name?
Caswell.
Caswell, yes.
Yes.
And you lived in the...
I lived in 24 Bridge Street, which I believe now is called Forge Cottage. And,
where was it just as it was now, or were there other cottages along to
No, there were two other cottages joined on coming towards the Donegaunt. And then, of course, on the opposite side to what is your house now was my father's forge, and also another cottage, which I believe now is called...
Was Rose Cottage?
Rose Cottage, yes. That's right, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a very old cottage there, but which was renovated later on, obviously, to a very nice cottage, but on the same site. But it's obviously much bigger because it's taken my father's workshops, etc.
Into it, yes.
Yes.
And do you remember the other cottages coming down?
Yes, I do. I can vaguely remember. We had a variety of people live in them when I was a child. But after the war, we had people who lived with us moved into what is now Rose Cottage, and I also had an elderly aunt who had run a part of the public house in Hungerford move into the cottage next door to us. I can always remember that one particularly because it always flooded. Our house never flooded, you know.
No, because the air bricks are
much
higher.
Yes, that never flooded. But the two next door did. There was Mr. and Mrs. Lydiard lived in the end cottage, and I think their family are dotted around the area now. Mr. and Mrs. Lydiard, I think, or Mrs. Lydiard definitely died. I'm not sure about Mr. Lydiard, but I know that Brian Lydiard still lives in Hungerford, and I think Eric Lydiard does too. And there was two daughters, but I'm not quite sure where they are now. But as children who grew up.
When did those cottages come down? Can you remember that?
No, I can't really. It must have been, I went off to college in 1949, and I came back, after 3 years, and my mother was still living in the house then, and they were still standing there, and I had an aunt in there, so it was obviously after the time. Oh,
it's quite relatively recently. I imagine they'd been down some considerable time.
So obviously it's been in the interim period while I've been away, and I can see that, part of your house now, which was a loft and garages underneath, is now all part of the house itself. By the look of it, extended the house.
Yes, somebody must have extended that some years ago, I think. Yes.
There were we had two garages, one for our own car, and we also had a garage there for a Mr. Fernley Taylor, who was the chemist, which is the shop which is now Pettit's, I suppose, the dress shop.
Oh, the dress shop, across the road.
Yes.
Well, that's where the chemist was.
That's right, and then it went on from Fernley Taylor to another chemist who has just died, just recently. I'm just trying to think of his name. It's gone at the moment, but it may come back. And then, of course, there was the red stores, and there was a little stationery shop. And what else was there down there? Oh, the print shop was Raises, which is now further up the road here, of course. Yes, and
Raises have been around for a long time.
Oh, they have, yes. I remember Mr. and Mrs. Raisey well. I remember Mr. Raisey died a long time ago and Mrs. Raisey took the business on. And in fact, Eric Lydiard, who used to live in one of those cottages, worked for them for years. Now, whether he still works in this shop down here, now, I don't know, because I lost contact with a childhood acquaintance, And I really don't know. But that little end shop, which is now an antique shop, I suppose it is, the very one next door to the Bear, where the new bridge has just been built.
Oh yes, Bibi's.
That's right, yes. Well, that was Clements. He was a jeweller, a very old-fashioned jeweller. Lovely little shop, full of all sorts of...
Well, that's a shame, because there's no jeweller now.
No. And then it was taken over by Earthis of Newbury, and I think it was Earthis? I think I've got the right name. And they had a jeweller shop in Newbury as well, and one of the brothers ran that one, had the Newbury one, and then of course when I came home one of the times it had changed. Because although I went right away from Hungerford, we sort of obviously hovered back again, because I taught for 4 years in the Midlands, West Bromwich, and then I came back home and not to live, but I got married and we lived at Froxfield, and that's where my husband went for Jones to go. And then after 10 years there, he went to work at Chamberhouse Farm, which is Thatcham, but of course my mother was still living in Hungerford in the meantime, my husband and my father had died, so we obviously linked back and forward. But of course, when you've got ties of another kind, you don't come back quite as much. In fact, I probably took my mother to me more than I came, to hang with
But
her.
your father was actually the blacksmith.
Yes, he was.
And it was across the road where Rose Cottage is now.
Yes.
And how long did he sort of work there and practice?
Oh, well, he died in 1956.
And it was still a forge
And
then?
it was still a forge then. I think it was bought by someone who actually used it as a forge. I can't really remember. My father died in very tragic circumstances. He hung himself, I'm afraid. And he'd always worked for himself, and had always been a very happy, very fussy gentleman who never would do a job. He would overcharge for it. He certainly wouldn't do a job unless he thought it was worth the money that he was charged for. And he never charged enough, obviously. But he was very, very thorough. And he wasn't just a blacksmith. He did the most beautiful wrought iron. He made staircases, gates, and all sorts of things. And he had a chance to go and work for someone else in the town as a manager and do the maintenance on their firm. But my father just couldn't get men to work to the standard that the people were, and it worried him. It also probably worried him. He bought a house. We bought this house. My parents had bought this very nice house on Church Way. I'm not quite sure what the name of it is now, but Mr. and Mrs. Pratt from the butcher shop bought it from my mother after my father died, because my parents never actually moved into it. They were due to move into it in August. And I can always remember my uncle saying, "I hope you haven't put a millstone round your neck," which was a very strange thing when I think back of it now, because obviously I think the house was something like 4,000, but that was a lot of money for a house in those days. But my father wasn't the kind of man to spend money that he hadn't got, and he knew perfectly well that if he bought that house he could afford it. And my aunt was a dressmaker, my mother's sister, and she was still living, one of the last members of the family. She was going to live with them, and she was going to have her own sitting room, etc. And it was a 4-bedroom house, and of course my mother never moved into it because they were due to move into it at the end of August, and he was not well. He hovered on the edge of a nervous breakdown, very unhappy in the work he was doing. He was just not the man he was, and seemed to pick up, went away on holiday, came back, got up one morning, emptied his greenhouse out of everything he could, because he gave away so much stuff out of his greenhouse and his garden, because where all those houses are now, where you live, that was all garden.
That was all garden.
Yes, and he didn't come home for breakfast. In the meantime, I had gone out for the day down to the coast with a girlfriend who also was a Hungarian. Her name was Barbara. She said to go. And when we came home, my husband was standing in the road, standing on the end, and my father hung himself that morning, which was just dreadful, I mean, just couldn't believe it. I knew that he still wasn't well. He'd been away on holiday, and he'd come back, and everybody thought he was better. He'd come out the night before to see me. We lived at the farm out at Foxfield then, and we had a new house. It was called 2 New Cottages, but they were 2 new modern houses, and we worked for James and family. This is who my father had gone to work for. And they were friends, they'd always been friends, and he came back that evening and said, "I'd like to just pop and see Susan again." Susan was 1 year old at the time. And I thought it was just strange that he wanted to go back upstairs to see Susan, because he'd just come down, and he just said, "I'll just go and have another peep at her." And I never saw him again. He went out and saw her and came back down, and of course my mother was frantic when I came home. And, she never really settled, and of course she just couldn't wait.
Did she stay on that?
For as little time as possible. Dudley James, who obviously was a friend and family as well as who my father was ever working for, and my husband was also working for his farm as an assistant, helped her to find another house, and I think we sold the whole of that business down there for the business and the cottages and all the ground for some remarkable sum of like 2,700 or something ridiculous.
What did he say back?